Against the plate, the boy she was speaking to couldn't have been older than 13, sitting quietly at a table near the window. His brown skin glowed under the afternoon sun streaming through the glass. His posture stiffened, his shoulders shrinking into himself as he glanced around the room. Unsure of what to do, the woman, probably in her 50s, stood towering over him. Her pale face twisted into a sneer. She continued, "This place isn't for people like you. Go eat somewhere else." The boy's eyes darted toward the front counter, where a server froze mid-step. Caught between intervening and keeping the peace, his lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. The restaurant had fallen into an eerie silence, the kind that made the sound of your heartbeat feel loud. "Excuse me, ma'am, is there a problem?" The manager finally emerged. His voice calm but firm. He was an older white man, probably no stranger to uncomfortable situations like this. She turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "I'm just saying, people like him don't belong in a nice place like this. It ruins the atmosphere, you know. You should think about your clientele." The boy's face turned red, and he stared at his hands, his small fingers gripping the edge of the table. "Ma'am, he's a customer, just like everyone else here. If you're uncomfortable, you're welcome to leave," the manager replied, crossing his arms. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Clearly, she wasn't used to being challenged. "Well, I never," she began, but before she could finish, the boy's voice broke through the tension. "I'm just waiting for my mom," he said softly, his voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the quiet. "She's parking the car," the woman scoffed. "Oh, I see. Your mom couldn't afford to park in the lot, huh?" Her tone dripped with condescension, and a few gasps rippled through the room. At that moment, the door swung open, and a tall, elegant black woman walked in. She was wearing a tailored navy blue suit, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. Her presence was commanding, the kind that made everyone sit up a little straighter. The woman's smug expression faltered as the boy's face lit up. "Mom?" he called out, relief washing over his features. The woman who had been so full of venom only seconds ago stood frozen. Her eyes widening in shock, she recognized the boy's mother. Everyone did. Dr. Camille Henderson, a renowned heart surgeon, philanthropist, and, as it turned out, the keynote speaker at a medical conference being held in town that weekend. Her face had been plastered on banners all over the city. "Is there a problem?" Dr. Henderson asked coolly, her gaze settling on the woman who had been harassing her son. The woman stammered, her cheeks flushing. "Oh, no. I was just, She tripped over her words, looking smaller and more pitiful with each passing second. Dr. Henderson didn't wait for her to finish. She turned to the manager. "Thank you for stepping in." "My son and I will be staying for lunch." The manager nodded quickly, gesturing toward the table. "Of course, Dr. Henderson. We're honored to have you." As she sat down, the boy's confidence seemed to return. He smiled at his mom, who gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Meanwhile, the woman who had caused the scene shuffled awkwardly to the door, her earlier bravado completely gone. The room was still quiet, but now it buzzed with a different kind of energy, one of admiration and respect for the mother and son, and a shared disgust for the woman who had tried to humiliate them. When the boy's meal arrived, he dug in with a smile, as if reclaiming the simple joy of eating in peace. Dr. Henderson glanced at him, her eyes softening. He nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for being here." As for the racist woman, no one stopped her as she slinked out the door, her face pale and her head low, and no one missed her when she was gone. The woman didn't leave the restaurant unscathed the moment she stepped outside. A few murmurs from those seated near the windows followed her departure. Conversations, hushed at first, began to ripple throughout the restaurant. People started piecing together who she was, or rather, who she wasn't. That was disgusting, a young couple near the counter said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Their eyes darted over to Dr. Henderson and her son, offering a soft smile, almost apologetic, as if trying to make up for the earlier hatefulness. "Some people don't deserve public spaces," a man muttered, shaking his head while buttering his bread. Back at their table, Dr. Henderson shifted her focus fully to her son. Her composed exterior stayed intact, but the slight furrow in her brow betrayed how the moment weighed on her. "Tyler," she began, keeping her voice low so only he could hear. "What happened? I need to know exactly what she said to you." He hesitated, pushing his fork around his plate. "She just started saying we didn't belong here," he admitted, his voice small but steady. "She said things like," he trailed off, hesitant to repeat her words. Dr. Henderson's jaw tightened. "Like what, Tyler? I need you to tell me." He sighed, his shoulders slumping. She said people like me ruin nice places. His lip quivered, and despite his best effort to hold it back, a tear slid down his cheek. I didn't do anything, Mom. I just sat here. I didn't do anything. The resolve in her face cracked just for a moment as her hand reached across the table to cup his cheek. Listen to me, Tyler, she said firmly. You didn't do anything wrong. She's the problem, not you. You have just as much of a right to be here as anyone else. He nodded, though his expression was unsure. I mean it, she continued, her voice softening. You remember who you are and where you come from. You're smart, you're kind, and no one gets to decide what you're worth. Tyler nodded again, this time more confidently. His mom had a way of making things feel less heavy. Even when the world didn't seem fair, the server approached timidly. Interrupting the quiet moment, Dr. Henderson, she said, fiddling nervously with her apron. I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for what happened. That woman had no right to treat you or your son that way. If there's anything I can do, your meal is on us. Of course, Dr. Henderson held up a hand, stopping her apology. Thank you, she said simply. But my son and I are here to enjoy our meal, not to dwell on the behavior of someone who clearly has a lot of work to do on herself. The server nodded quickly, retreating with visible relief. Tyler leaned closer to his mom. Why do people act like that, though? He asked quietly. If she knew who you were, do you think she'd have still said those things? Dr. Henderson didn't answer right away. Instead, she stirred the straw in her water glass, her gaze focused on the ripples spreading across the surface. Some people, Tyler, base their judgments on skin color before they ever look at someone's heart or mind. That's a reflection of who they are, not who you are. He nodded slowly, taking that in. But would she have acted differently? She might have, Dr. Henderson admitted. But that's the thing, you shouldn't have to prove your worth to be treated with respect. Nobody should. Their conversation was interrupted by another table, a middle-aged black man with his teenage daughter. They came over, apologizing for interrupting but wanting to acknowledge what had just happened. You handled that with more grace than most, the man said. We just wanted to say we're grateful for people like you setting an example, Doctor. Henderson smiled politely, thanking him for his kind words. Tyler, too, managed a small smile of his own, his confidence beginning to build again. By the time their plates were cleared and dessert menus offered, the tension in the restaurant had shifted entirely, if there were still whispers. They weren't about Dr. Henderson or Tyler. They were about the shameful woman who had stormed out, leaving behind nothing but the echo of her ignorance. Before leaving, Dr. Henderson stopped by the counter to pay. Refusing the server's offer to comp their bill, she left a generous tip as they walked toward the door. Tyler glanced up at her. Mom, he said, his tone curious. Are you really not mad? She paused, resting a hand on his shoulder as they stepped into the sunlight. Oh, I'm mad, she said, smiling faintly. But anger alone doesn't fix anything. You know how we respond to people like her, how we keep being excellent? She said simply, we keep doing what we're meant to do, and we don't let small-minded people stop us from taking up space in this world. As they got into the car, Tyler sat a little taller, feeling maybe, for the first time that day, that he wasn't the one who needed to shrink. Later that evening, Tyler was sitting at the dining table with his sketchbook open. Drawing always helped him clear his mind. He'd been working on a piece of the city skyline, but now his pencil hovered over the page. Unsure of where to move next, his mom walked in. Still in her suit, but with her heels replaced by house slippers. What you working on? She asked, peeking over his shoulder. Just a drawing, he said, but there was hesitation in his voice. She sat across from him, propping her chin on her hands. Something bothering you, Ty? He frowned, setting the pencil down. I've just been thinking about what happened. It's hard not to, you know. Dr. Henderson nodded. It makes sense. When something like that happens, it stays with you for a while. It's okay to feel that way. But I keep thinking about what I could have said, Tyler admitted. I just sat there. I didn't even say anything to her. Does that make me weak? Her face softened. Tyler, listen to me. It's not your job to defend your humanity to people like her. That's a battle you didn't need to fight, because who you are spoke louder than anything you could have said. You have nothing to prove to someone who refuses to see your worth, but it still hurt, he said quietly. I know it did, baby, she replied, and it's okay to admit that. The world will sometimes try to make you feel small, but that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who remind you of how big you truly are. Tyler nodded but didn't look up. How do you deal with it, though? Doesn't it make you want to give up sometimes? Dr. Henderson smiled sadly. Oh, it gets to me, Tyler. But then I think about how far our people have come. I think about all the times someone tried to tell me I didn't belong. They told me I couldn't be a surgeon, that I couldn't do what I do, and look where I am now. I don't let them take away my joy or my purpose, because if I give them that power, they win. And you're going to have to learn how to do the same. Tyler looked at her, his young face searching hers for a deeper understanding. But isn't it tiring? Exhausting, she admitted, laughing softly. But every time you hold your head up high in the face of someone like her, you're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for every person who's ever been told they weren't enough. And trust me, that's worth the effort. They sat there in comfortable silence for a moment before she reached over and ruffled his hair. Now, how about we wrap this day up right? What's your favorite ice cream? Tyler grinned despite himself. Cookies and cream it is, she said, standing up. Put your shoes on, we're going out. The smile on Tyler's face was the biggest she'd seen all day. Moments later, they were driving to a small, family-owned ice cream shop in town. Tyler ordered the biggest cone they offered, while Dr. Henderson stuck with a modest cup of strawberry. As they sat at one of the small outdoor tables, Tyler noticed something. The shop owner, an elderly black woman, had hung photos of her family and community around the shop. There were images of church gatherings, neighborhood cookouts, and even some old newspaper clippings celebrating local achievements. One photo, in particular, caught Tyler's eye, a grainy black and white image of a sit-in at a diner. Young black men and women sat at the counter, calm but determined, while angry faces surrounded them. Tyler stared at the image for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Mom, do you think they were scared? Dr. Henderson followed his gaze to the photo and nodded. I'm sure they were. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are. Tyler took a long lick of his ice cream and sat back, looking thoughtful. Maybe next time someone says something like that to me, I'll say something back. Maybe you will, his mom replied. And if you don't, that's okay too. Standing your ground doesn't always mean talking back. Sometimes it just means not letting them break you. Tyler didn't say much after that, but as they drove home, the quiet weight in the car felt lighter than before. That night, as he lay in bed, Tyler thought about the woman in the restaurant and her face when she realized who his mom was. For the first time, instead of feeling small or ashamed, he felt proud of his mom, proud of himself, and proud to take up space in a world that sometimes tried to push him out. And that pride was a kind of armor he knew he'd carry with him the next time he needed it. Over the next few days, Tyler noticed that the incident in the restaurant didn't completely leave his mind, but it began to take on a different meaning. At school, he started thinking more about the way people acted toward him, not just the cruel moments, but the silent ones too. The moments when people chose to stay quiet instead of stepping up. One afternoon, while waiting for the bus to take him home, Tyler overheard a group of older boys talking loudly behind him. At first, he wasn't paying much attention, but then he heard a voice snicker. Man, I can't believe that little black kid got picked for student council. Bet he just got in so they wouldn't look racist. Tyler's body went stiff. He wasn't sure why the words made his heart race, but they did. He turned slightly, catching sight of them, 3 boys, seniors probably leaning against the school's brick wall, backpacks slung low over their shoulders. They weren't talking to him, but they didn't care if he heard either. He felt a pang of that familiar feeling, like he didn't belong, like he was a target. But then, he remembered his mom's voice. Standing your ground doesn't always mean talking back. Sometimes it just means not letting them break you. Tyler gripped the strap of his backpack. He turned around and took a deep breath. Actually, he said, loud enough for the boys to hear, I got picked because I worked hard, but thanks for showing how much it bothers you. The boys snapped their heads in his direction, surprise flashing across their faces. For a second, he thought they might say something worse, but they didn't. One of them muttered something under his breath, but they quickly turned their attention elsewhere. Laughing it off to save face, Tyler walked to the bus with his head held high, his chest a little lighter than it had been moments before. That evening at dinner, he told his mom about what happened. She listened carefully, nodding as he spoke, her face unreadable. You spoke up, she said finally, a proud smile forming. How'd it feel? Nerve-wracking, Tyler admitted, twirling his fork, but also kind of good. Like I wasn't just letting them win, you know? That's because you didn't, she said. Every time you stand tall, Even when you're scared, you take back control. You don't give them the satisfaction of making you feel less than. Tyler nodded, chewing on her words as he finished his plate. A week later, Tyler's story about the restaurant came up in class during a discussion about current events. His teacher had asked if anyone had ever experienced unfair treatment or witnessed something wrong. Tyler raised his hand cautiously, unsure if sharing his story was the right move. But when he started talking, he noticed how quiet the room got. His classmates leaned in, listening as he recounted the events at the restaurant, what the woman said to him, and how his mom had handled it. "What did you want to say to her?" one girl asked after he finished. "I wanted to tell her she was wrong," Tyler admitted. "But honestly, I didn't need to," she embarrassed herself. "I just had to keep being me. My mom reminded me of that." His classmates nodded thoughtfully, and even his teacher gave him an approving smile. That night, Tyler came home with a new energy. At dinner, he turned to his mom and said, "Mom, do you think there are ways we can help people who feel like me? You know, kids who think they don't belong?" Dr. Henderson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I think there's always a way to help. What did you have in mind?" Tyler hesitated, but then the words spilled out. "Well, you're always talking about using your job to make a difference. You save lives as a surgeon. What if I could, I don't know, help kids feel proud of themselves, even when the world is against them? Maybe like a group or something." His mom set her fork down and smiled. "Tyler, that's an incredible idea. And it doesn't have to be a big thing to make a big difference. Even helping one or two people see their own value is a win." They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, and by bedtime, they had an idea. Tyler would start small by creating a club at school, a safe space where students could talk about their experiences with racism, bullying, or just feeling out of place. Within a month, Stand Tall, the name Tyler gave to his new club, was officially approved. He gathered a small group of students who'd experienced discrimination, others who just wanted to be allies. They began meeting once a week after school. During those meetings, Tyler shared more about his mom's advice, the strength he'd found after the restaurant incident, and the ways he was learning to stand tall. Each story he heard from his peers gave him more confidence. And every time someone shared something they'd been too scared to say before, he knew they were building something meaningful. And every time he came home and told his mom about what they talked about that day, she listened with the same pride she'd shown when she'd stood by him in the restaurant. Months later, Tyler walked into that same restaurant with his mom for lunch. The manager recognized them immediately and greeted them with a smile. "It's good to see you two again," he said, his voice warm this time. There were no hateful stares, no cruel comments, just Tyler and his mom sitting side by side, taking up space as they always should have. And this time, Tyler knew, without a doubt, that he belonged. As they ate, Tyler found himself glancing around the restaurant. The place seemed quieter than he remembered, but not in a bad way. It was peaceful, with soft conversations filling the air. He realized that he was no longer bracing himself for someone to say something cruel. He wasn't shrinking into his seat, wasn't trying to make himself smaller. He looked up at his mom, who was reading something on her phone as she waited for her meal. "Mom," he said, breaking the momentary silence, "do you ever feel nervous when you go to places like this? Like even after everything you've accomplished?" Dr. Henderson set her phone down and met his gaze. "Sometimes, yes, when you've faced prejudice, it doesn't just disappear." But she paused, leaning forward slightly. "I remind myself that my presence in places like this isn't just about me. It's about paving the way, so the next person you doesn't have to feel nervous. Or at least not as much." Tyler nodded, letting her words sink in. "It's hard to believe some people still think like that lady did." "It is," she agreed, "but the world is changing. One small step at a time. And every time you push back, stand your ground, or help someone else do the same, you're part of that change." He smiled, feeling the weight of her words settle into him, not as a burden, but as a responsibility he was ready to carry. Later that week, at a Stand Tall meeting, a new student joined the group. Her name was Ava, and she seemed nervous as she sat at the edge of the circle. Tyler noticed how she kept her head down, fiddling with the zipper on her hoodie. When it was her turn to speak, Ava hesitated. "I don't really know what to say," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I guess I just always feel like I don't fit in here. Like people are looking at me and judging me before they even know me." Tyler nodded, remembering how raw and vulnerable he'd felt that day in the restaurant. "Ava," he said gently, "you're not alone in feeling that way. But I'll tell you something my mom told me: you don't have to prove your worth to anyone. You belong here just as much as anybody else. Ava looked up, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thanks, she said softly. As the meeting went on, Ava opened up more. And by the end of it, she was smiling. She even volunteered to help plan the next meeting, watching her. Tyler felt a quiet pride, not just in her bravery, but in himself for helping create a space where she could feel safe enough to speak. Months turned into a year, and Stand Tall grew. From a small club into something bigger. Teachers began stopping by the meetings, offering support and ideas. The principal asked Tyler to speak during a school assembly about the importance of creating inclusive spaces. Other schools in the district even reached out, asking how they could start similar groups. Through it all, Tyler never forgot the woman in the restaurant, not because of the pain she'd caused, but because of what her cruelty had sparked in him. One day, after another successful meeting, he told his mom, "It's funny, isn't it? How something so bad can lead to something so good." His mom smiled at him from across the table, where she was grading papers for a lecture she'd agreed to give. "That's life, Tyler. It's not about avoiding the bad. It's about turning it into something meaningful." Years later, as an adult, Tyler found himself back in that same neighborhood, sitting in the very restaurant where it had all started. This time, he wasn't with his mom. He was meeting a friend who worked with him on a new nonprofit organization focused on mentorship for young people of color. As he waited, a server passed by carrying a tray of drinks. Tyler caught a glimpse of a young black boy sitting with his family. Laughing as he told a story, he couldn't help but smile at the boy's carefree joy, thinking about how far he'd come since that day years ago. When his friend arrived, they immediately got to work, discussing plans for an upcoming event. As they brainstormed ideas, Tyler's mind wandered briefly to that woman from so long ago. He didn't remember her face clearly anymore, but he remembered the lesson she had unwittingly taught him, that his identity wasn't just something to endure, it was something to celebrate. And as he walked out of the restaurant later that evening, holding the door open for an older couple, Tyler realized something. He didn't feel nervous or out of place anymore, not in this restaurant, or anywhere else. He felt unstoppable. Hey there! If this story moved you, don't forget to hit subscribe to join me for more powerful, real-life stories that spark change and inspire strength. Together, we can explore stories of resilience, justice, and the moments that make a difference. Your support helps amplify voices that need to be heard. So let's grow this community of change makers. Click subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together.